Happy spring greetings to all our friends from around the globe. This is Ramon Rocha of MAI. Editors are good friends of writers. Editors and writers are on the same team. We have two distinguished and friendly editors serving today at today's MAI webinar. Let me introduce the first one who will serve as our guest moderator. Hannah Rasmussen is the acquisitions editor at Oasis International, based in Nairobi, Kenya. She's the author of the book, Good News About Gender, a Bible study for young adults. Hannah coaches African Christian authors in their writing journey. In fact, Hannah is currently editing 12 manuscripts written by African authors. Thank you, Hannah, for being our guest moderator today. Please take it away.
It's good to see everyone. Welcome to this MAI webinar. We're glad that you're all here. We would love to have you interacting with us through the comments and the Q&A throughout the session. Whenever you want, you can type in a comment of something you liked or something you want to appreciate in the chat. And then I'll be looking over at the Q&A panel to see what questions we would like to ask Yna after she's done presenting. So feel free to write them down as they come up, and we'll try to get to as many questions as we can. We're going to have about 20 minutes for that interaction after the presentation, or maybe a little bit in the middle of the presentation, because she has two separate topics that she wants to cover. This is a really important topic, to find out how to look for authors, not just manuscripts. I know in some of the work that I've done, somebody might come to me with a book idea, and that's not the book that they really have in them. They might think that they have this one great message, but God has actually given them a different message that they haven't known how to draw out yet. But they come to you with a manuscript and showing that actually this person is dedicated. They want to work, they want to write. And sometimes you have to actually look for what that book is that they have. And sometimes it's somebody who hasn't thought of themselves as a writer before. Maybe they're a pastor, maybe they're leading a ministry, and they have a really great concept that could really bless the church, and they have never explored the writing avenue. So sometimes you're looking for the communicators, and the people who have a specialty or an expertise or a ministry thing that they can bring to the church, and helping them to become a writer and to create a book that isn't out there yet. So that's some of my experience with this idea of don't just look for manuscripts, look for authors. And sometimes one author has more than one book in them, and it's a slower process than you might expect than having a ready-made manuscript, but sometimes it produces a lot more fruit in the long run. So I'm excited to hear what Yna has to say. It's so relevant to me, and I believe that all of us are going to be really blessed by what she has to share. She has a lot of experience. Yna Reyes is a publishing and communications director at OMF Literature in the Philippines. She has been involved with MAI for 20 years and currently serves as the secretary of MAI-Asia. And she's also a children's book author and storyteller, and you can read a little bit about her most recent book on the MAI blog. So I'm excited to hear what she has to share with us about Christian publishing and looking for authors today. Over to you, Yna.
Thank you, Hannah. I think you can handle this session too, editing 12 books all at the same time. Anyway, good evening, good morning, and good afternoon, whatever time it is. Mabuhay from Manila. It's my pleasure to be with you at this time to share with you some of the learnings that I've had working with authors. Um, I have some notes with me so that I can keep the time. So I'll start now. In my past visits to several Asian countries to conduct MAI editorial trainings, one of the things I noticed was that most of the projects that the editors were working on were translations of foreign titles. In one country I visited, after the first day of a 3-day workshop, I was requested to do a session the next day on editing translations. The participants were requesting it according to the organizer. I was surprised and a bit disappointed because I was there to help them, to equip them in editing original manuscripts. Still, I was there to serve their needs, and so I put together a session for them on editing translations. It is understandable for local publishing ministries set up by foreign missions agencies to publish translations of books by the authors of those missions agencies. But I believe that for an indigenous publishing ministry, it has to be more relevant. It needs to look for indigenous voices, original works by local authors. So in this webinar, my objective is to show you that the locals, the men and women born and brought up in our respective countries, are our best potential authors. Therefore, our work as editors is to look for them and to make the best authors out of them. Now I'd like to start sharing my screen. All right. So that's the title of our webinar. Don't just look for manuscripts, look for potential local authors. I believe that locals are the best potential authors for us, and here are the reasons why I believe that. So first, I'd like to show you, this is the Philippine delegation at Lit World 2015 in Singapore. And they're my background picture for this part. So locals are our best potential authors, first because they are the ones in community with the readers we want to reach. They breathe the same air they breathe, eat the same staple food, go to the same market, take the local transportation, and experience the struggles our target readers face every day. They know what it means to live in our country. They know the needs, the hopes, and aspirations of our people. Therefore, these local potential authors are the best people who can write about issues that matter to our readers and to write them with authenticity. Also, locals speak the heart language of our people. They grasp the nuances and complexities of our language and know the right words and the best way to communicate in order to connect with them. Locals are the ones who study and seek to apply scriptures in our own historical and cultural contexts. They desire and find ways to appropriate the Christian faith to our context with care and with creativity. It is the locals who know the folk tales and stories that have shaped the minds and hearts of our target readers and that resonate with them. With this knowledge, they can then draw from these treasures in order to enrich their own writing. And locals are the ones who bear the burden to disciple the next generation of Christians in our country. And for local writers, writing is part of disciple making. Our potential local authors are the men and women that God planted, prepared, and equipped to serve in our mission field through the books that they will write. They are the ones blessed with the gifts of language, literature, and experiences unique to our respective countries. They are the ones with the burning desire to share the story that God has written in their life. They are the men and women called by God to proclaim the good news in words that connect with our people. Therefore, our job as editors is to look for these local men and women that the Lord has called and prepared to be his mouthpiece. Whether we are an editor in Indonesia, in India, Kenya, South Africa, France, Cote d'Ivoire, Zambia, Nigeria, and all the other 25 countries represented in this webinar. So, where do we look for these potential local authors? We need to search two spheres, and we know what these two spheres are: online and offline, right? Now that everybody is online, it is actually easier to look for potential authors. So where do we look for? Look at social media, Twitter posts, Facebook posts, Instagram posts. You can sense from the comments or the issues that these people raise if there is something burning in them that they can write about in a book. See? Or of course, the webinar speakers, the writers groups, readers groups, online writing contests like the ones MAI has been holding. And a recent winner is a Filipino who is also one of our authors. So blogs, of course, and Wattpad. So Wattpad is a community of story writers and leads from friends. So really, there are many places online where we can look for these potential authors. How about offline? Of course, in our churches, parachurches, these are the usual places to look for potential authors. But also, it is important to go on the field, on the streets, where these people are serving the man and the woman on the streets. Let's go to political rallies like the picture shown here, especially in the Philippines, which is a very political country, many political issues. The Christians who are serious about issues in politics, I'm sure you will find them in one of those political rallies. So I'd just like to share with you some of our finds, the authors we discovered in these different places. So Reyes, our Beng Alba actually discovered him in one theological forum. We require our editors to attend these theological forums so that we can look for writers there. And we discovered Ray in a session that he was conducting. And this is actually his second book with us. In English, it means, "Is Your Bible Boring?" Okay. So how your story fits in the big story. And this book has been voted as a reader's choice by thousands of Filipinos who voted online. And this book also is being used as a study material inside the prison in the Philippines. There. Now, from a blog, so this is one example. Maybe some of you are familiar with the story of Katie. So Katie is the daughter of Felice and Jay Lucas, and she had this rare disease. And so Felice and Jay put up a blog about their journey, praying for Katie, going through all these treatments. And they had thousands of followers. And so we thought it would be good to find them, go to them and ask them to write a book. Not what they wrote on the blog, not anymore that, but deeper treatment of their journey. So that's one example. And this one, Jonathan Nambu and Thelma Nambu are a husband and wife, founders of Samaritana, which is a ministry for prostituted women. For many years, I've been inviting the two of them, convincing them to write about their ministry, but they were so busy. And finally, on their the 25th anniversary of Samaritana, they decided it's time to write their story. So Leaping and Dancing is the story of Samaritana, and Gentle Disciplines is a book about spiritual disciplines. Jonathan Nambu, by the way, is not Filipino. He is Japanese American, but he is local by heart. He has lived in the Philippines for a long time, married a Filipina, and I think I can say he is more Filipino than many Filipinos. So you see, it's not necessarily that the writer has to be 100% Filipino, but if their heart is for your country, then that is a good potential author. How about from a dissertation? This book is a dissertation of Janina in her PhD in creative writing. This is about her story. A few veins in her brain ruptured, which caused partial blindness. And with this came anxiety and depression and all these troubles. And Janina wrote about all of these in her book. Now for another thing that you can do is to call for submissions, like what we did. This is a book that we released in 2018. We called for submissions of poems. Remember, there was a time that poetry became a trend again. And so Mitch, who is standing behind me, is the editor, and she's the poet in the team. And so she convinced us that we should publish a book of poetry. And so we called for submissions, and we discovered, I think these are 12 Filipino poets in this book. And here I just want to share the inspiring story of Joyce and Tinay. We conducted a workshop for children's book creators where we decided to partner a writer with an illustrator. Joyce and Tinay did not know each other. They just met in the parking lot before the workshop. And so they met for the first time and they walked upstairs together. And then in the workshop, when it was decided that there has to be pairs for an author and an illustrator together, they decided to pair, to work together. And so after that decision came all these 10 children's books, which actually is one of our best-selling series. So there are really many places where we can find these writers, and we will be surprised when we discover them. But before we look, we have to know what we are looking for. So we have to ask, are you looking for a man or woman with a compelling story? Somebody whose work is original? And of course, if you're a Christian publisher, this author should be serious with the Word of God. Or does this author have practical knowledge that he can share, like maybe parenting or handling money, all these practical life skills, no? And of course, it's important that the author has a vibrant witness, because the author will represent your publishing company, right? And nowadays, of course, it is very helpful if the author that you get has a strong social media platform, if she has a network of followers. Like the author here, this is one of our authors, Bettina. She has around 1 million Instagram followers. So imagine having an author who has that range of influence, right? So determine with your team What are your non-negotiables? What are the musts? And what are the wants? What are some things that we hope we can have, but it's not really that important? All right. So now, once you have found that author, there's a song in, I think it's in South Pacific, that goes like, it says, once you have found her, never let her go, right? Once you have found her, never let her go. I think that's true for our authors too, you know. Once you have found them, never let them go. So our work now as editors is to nurture them. And the bottom line of nurture for the new writer really is encouragement, right? So the short Oxford Dictionary defines encourage as to inspire with courage. Editors can actually give two kinds of encouragement to the new writer. That is personal encouragement and technical encouragement. So these are the two topics that I'll be sharing with you in this webinar. Let's start with personal encouragement. Writing is an exacting work. It calls for stamina, energy, willpower, and talent. That is why an editor must provide unremitting encouragement and demonstrate faith in the writer and in his or her writing. We know that writing affects the whole person, right? When you think about the matters that concern your church or your community or your country, sometimes these issues can make you cry. You know? Sometimes these issues are too hard to bear. And so it's important for us as editors to be there to give personal encouragement to the writer. And how do you do that? So first is to get to know the writer personally. I suggest that for your first meeting, meet in an informal place, like meet over coffee or a nice meal. And I hope you can charge the expense to your organization, you know, include it in the budget. And in that meeting, don't talk about the project first. Ask about his or her family. Ask about what are his hopes and aspirations. What is his vision for the book? Why did he write the book? So break the ice and get to know the writer. And in the process of working together on the manuscript, your work is not just to come out with a good book, but to work towards becoming a trusted friend of the writer. So it's important to be a trusted friend. It's important to be a listening ear to the writer. Bernsley, who is with us here, the publisher of Graceworks and chairperson of MAI-Asia, has this advice. She says, knowing your writers holistically helps you to retain their voice or style when you are editing their manuscript. A better relationship will also have positive effects on your editorial interactions with them. You might be able to couch your requests in ways that they will receive better, and they will be less guarded or easily offended if they understand that you want the best for their baby, right? So it's important for us to really know the writer. One of our former editors, Beng Alba Jones, is now MAI secretary. She worked with this first-time writer. His name is Ru. And Ru is a youth pastor. His story was compelling, but he lacked confidence and needed hand-holding in the course of the project. So Beng constantly reassured Ru that he can and should write, and that his powerful message of God's redeeming grace needed to be told. Also, Beng literally took the extra mile, 50 miles to be exact, and took a bus trip to Ru's city to go to his church to listen to him preach at his church's youth gathering. So Beng wanted to hear how he speaks, to young people so that she could preserve his voice in the book that she is editing. So this is what it means to go out of your way to show care for the writer and to know the writer better. Here's Bank's advice to editors. She says, don't be afraid to go beyond being professional in your dealing with the writers. Be their friend, earn their trust, care for them and their manuscript. Find out what makes them tick and don't force them into any mold. That is to ask them to write in a certain way that is different from their own style and voice. Inspire them and help them feel that you are partners in creating their book, even if you never get to see your name in the book cover or title page. All right, the second suggestion I'd like to suggest to you is to communicate with clarity and openness. Okay, so clear communication is vital to our relationship with the writer from the start of the project up to its completion. So at the outset, be clear about your role in the working relationship. You are the writer's partner in creating the book, but you are not his co-writer and you are not his personal assistant. So that has to be clear. You are his friend, not his rival, so that when you make suggestions to the manuscript, the writer won't be defensive about it because he knows that you two are as much invested in this project as he is. Also, he needs to understand that you are the advocate of the reader. You represent the reader in this project, so that every suggestion that you make, you are making it because you want the reader to understand the book that will be in his hands. And of course, it's also important for the writer to appreciate that you represent the publisher too, because it is the publisher that is investing all the resources that are needed to put his manuscript together into a book. Also, be clear about the vision for the book. You should be on the same page on what you want this book to achieve. Be clear about expectations from each other. Clear about the details of the contract, the schedules and deadlines of every aspect of the project, like the deadline for the first 3 chapters, the deadline for the biblio, the deadline for all the things that you will need. You have to agree on all of these. Also agree on how and when to communicate. Will you communicate by email only, or is text message okay with you also? Or through private message in Messenger? Are you okay with the writer calling you on a weekend? I know a writer who called our editor at near midnight. So it's important for you to be clear that there are hours that need to be for you alone. So he doesn't have to be in your schedule 24 hours, right? So throughout the project, it is important that you communicate with the writer consistently. Third is give sound writing advice. Our desire is to help the new writer achieve good writing. And good writing is not just about diction or grammatical correctness and structural soundness. A manuscript can have all these and still fail to connect with the reader. And so part of our work as editors is to bring the writer closer to the target readers. So encourage the writer to envision the person he or she is writing for and to ask questions like, what does my book have to do with the reader? What do I want the reader to feel, think, and do after reading my book? What will be my reader's takeaways from the book? And in the course of writing, the writer needs to learn to ask questions like, will my target readers understand this word or phrase? Is this thought simple enough or too abstract? Do I need to add a story to illustrate? Will the readers find this statement helpful or offensive? So really, this is a discipline that the writer needs to develop, to always keep the reader in mind. Then we can boost the writer's confidence by highlighting specific areas in the manuscript that were written well. There are some authors who don't write well, but they have the idea. So compliment them for raising that point and for how they handled that point. Our job then as editors is to help them expand that good idea. But first, point out the strengths of his work. For example, the book concept itself, or his original ideas, or his compelling stories, all the strengths that you find in his book. Then after affirming him of the merits of his manuscript, gently point out the weak points or the points that would need further work. So remind the writer that every word, phrase, and sentence in the manuscript should contribute to the whole book and move its vision forward. Remind the writer of the impact we want the book to have on the readers. Next, which is very important, is to frame suggestions as questions. See, so we are not just making corrections here. Instead, in the course of editing, the best way to help the writer see the weak points of his manuscript is to ask helpful questions. So this way, we will not embarrass the author, and the author will not be defensive. He will be open to our suggestions. So ask questions like, I'm not sure I understand what you mean by this. Can you explain further? Or is this a factual statement or a personal opinion? Can you provide the source? Or did Jesus really say this? Would it be better if we put his words in quotes as written in the Bible? So really, we need to do all of these subtle, correcting through asking questions. And another simple tip also is, instead of using I, let's use we. Like my example here, like, would it be better if we put his words in quotes? Because this reminds the writer that we are partners in this project and that I am here to support you, and really we will see this project through. Remember, writers, especially new writers, often lack confidence in their work. They can be overly sensitive and protective of their baby. As Bernie said, that's their baby. Having spent countless hours thinking about it, doing research, and writing it down. Also, right, you wouldn't tell a mom that her baby is ugly, right? So remember, the manuscript is the writer's baby. Next is balance being gentle and being tough. Every writer has a bad habit, and we all know that, especially for some of us who also write. So these are the common habits of writers, like not keeping the deadline, procrastination, carelessness, in statements, in figures, laziness, in making generalizations, not doing research, assuming, or jumping to conclusions. And then in writing, writing cliches and other darlings, like for us Christians, we have a lot of cliches, right? Christian cliches like accept Jesus to your heart, right? By faith, these phrases. So we really have to challenge our writers to think of fresh ways to put words together in order to connect with their readers. So help your writer to break the bad habit and replace it with a good one. Next, yes, it is important to set boundaries. You know, some writers can be very needy, right? Some would like to ask everything, get solutions from you instead of them thinking about solutions. So it's important for you to set boundaries, or else you will be stressed out and you won't enjoy working with a writer. So an important question that we have to figure for ourselves is, how do you balance being all there for the writer and making him or her aware that he or she is not the only writer you're working with? So we really have to think about that. And then pray for and with the writer. So writing requires wisdom, courage, patience, honesty, discipline, sacrifice, faithfulness, perseverance, all of these, right? And the writer cannot bear the burden of the work all by himself. So we can carry the burden with him or her through prayer. So whenever you email the writer, don't forget to ask how you can pray for him or her. Or when you call him or meet him, take some time to pray together. Include the writer in your prayer list and let the writer know that you are praying for him or her. I'm sure the writer will be encouraged to know that. So these are just a few suggestions. I'm sure you will discover other ways to encourage the writer you're working with. What's most important is this: do whatever it takes to help the writer fulfill his or her call from God in the writing of his or her book. And I like to show this point through a story that Bernice Lee shared with me. Let me read to you. This is from Bernice. She says, this writer had chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, but wanted to publish her journey because it was a promise she'd made to God. She was bedbound much of the time and attached to a BPAP machine that helped push oxygen into her lungs. This was after about 12 years battling with COPD. I met her face to face only 2 or 3 times because she couldn't afford to be exposed to external infections and was cocooned within her home with the windows and doors shut tight and the air conditioning on. We had to communicate either by email when she had the strength to use her computer, or by text messages because she could lie in bed and do that. It took months. Look at this. It took months in between drafts as she refined her manuscript about her roller coaster ride with God as her fellow traveler. We managed to print her book in time for her to have the joy of holding it in her hands. Her condition deteriorated quite markedly after that, and she had to be placed in palliative care soon after, and she has since gone home to her beloved father. Imagine that. No? Imagine being part of that work of helping this writer fulfill her promise to the Lord, right? And this is the cover spread for that book, Roller Coastering with God. This is by Grace Works. So I'll end here and entertain questions. And then I'll go to the second part after the Q&A. So I'll stop share.
Thank you so much for that amazing presentation, Yna. I was taking a few notes myself, and one person asked if they could get a copy of the notes after this is over. Would that be possible?
Oh, sure. Yes, sure. It'll be my pleasure.
All right, we'll ask Ramon to facilitate that with the list of all the attendees here, because you had so many great pieces of advice, both about how to find those authors originally and then also just how to walk with them through the whole process. This is a crash course on being a great editor. So we're really blessed to have all this. There's a few questions that have come in. One of them is, what are the top 3 no-nos that an editor should avoid in working with a writer?
No. Oh. I think making the writer cry. you know, really, first I think is a no for an editor is to work as if it's your book, right? This is not your book. This is the writer's book. You are helping the writer put the book together. So do not act as if it is your book, because it is not your book. Okay. Second is pride, I think. I can't imagine an editor being arrogant and proud. You cannot work with a writer if you have that attitude, So pride is second. Third is, do not, well, maybe we're already editing using the computer, right? But for those who are still using pen and paper, do not mark the manuscript with red ink. Never do that thing, because the manuscript will bleed and the writer will really feel very bad about it. So yeah, those are the 3 top of mind.
Yeah, great. I mean, there's a follow-up question to what you mentioned about not making it your own manuscript. Tim Welch asks, how does an editor not become the author? If the author has good ideas but not good writing skills, at what point do you intervene and just help them get it done? And at what point are you taking over the manuscript?
If the writer really, if the writer really cannot, if the author, if the content provider, okay, if the content provider is not a writer, right, maybe you really would need a co-writer to work with the content provider, because not all authors are writers, you see. So it has to be clear at the beginning of the project if, okay, the author can work on this as a writer, or the author really has great ideas but he really cannot write. So it has to be clear about that. But really try hard. You really have to try hard to keep the voice of the author. If the author does not have a voice yet, then keep it as simple as it is, Just respect the ownership of the manuscript. Yeah.
Another person asks, who is a journalist and a writer, is editing a newspaper the same as editing a book? And to what extent is there carryover of those skills?
No, it's a lot different. Editing a book is like a marathon. Editing a newspaper article is like a sprint, right? So it is different, and even the tone in the book is different. It would depend on the author, because my undergrad is journalism, so I would know. So in journalism, there is a way of writing, articles, short and fast, and because you are limited to a certain number of words, right? But in a book, you have more space to express yourself and to be more creative. No? So it's really different. Yeah. But the need for excellence, for writing well, is the same, So it's just the style that is different. And also the topics. Like there are topics that render better in a book that cannot be captured in a newspaper article, you know. Yeah.
Someone else asks, if you're not marking a manuscript with red, what's the best color?
Maybe green, so that it'll be different from black, you know. Green, but not red. Green or blue, no. Or maybe you can ask the writer, is it okay? Like you say, you know, my favorite color is lavender. My favorite color is lavender. Is it okay if I mark the manuscript with lavender? You know, just because red is really offensive, you know. So anything except red.
It's associated with a lot of people with teachers marking their papers, I think.
Yes,
and
that's
that
true.
has a negative reminder.
That's true.
I want to make time for you to do the next part of the presentation. So
All right.
I think we will move into that now. I know that we only have about 12 minutes left. So
Oh, really? Okay.
You had such great content. So if anyone has to leave at the top of the hour, feel free. This will all be recorded. It is all recorded, and it's going to be posted on MAI's YouTube channel.
All right.
So if you haven't had a chance to get your question answered, even if you have to drop off, we will answer it, hopefully at the end of this second part of the presentation. And you'll be able to just go onto the YouTube channel and fast forward towards the last bit and see what her response was. And I hope that you also get to see this, the last bit of this second PowerPoint, because I believe it's also going to be really helpful. So thanks for all your interaction, and we want to get this last little
10
set
minutes
of tips from her as well. Yeah.
All right.
So keep on posting your questions as she goes through this next part. I've also got some great comments about how much people are appreciating this presentation. And
all right. So the next kind of do you see my slides? Yeah?
Yes.
All right. So the next one, so the first one is personal encouragement. The next is technical encouragement. So equally important is technical encouragement we can give to the writer. This is aimed at building his or her writing skills. So while you're working with the writer, the best technical encouragement you can give is to explain each and every major suggestion you are making in the development of the manuscript. For many first-time writers, the first book project is an enriching learning experience. Some writers may need more help than others. To those who need more help, you may need to show samples of other books that can serve as models. Some writers may request feedback on the first 1 or 2 chapters first, just to be sure that they are on the right direction. If they need a bit more hand-holding, let's be there for them. Second, emphasize the value of research and fact-checking. Research and fact-checking are disciplines that every writer needs to learn. Propositions based on research are authoritative and credible, and research can be based on scientific studies, surveys, interviews, focus group discussions. Third, rewriting. Rewriting, stress the importance of rewriting. So rewriting results to good writing. This is a principle that we should help the writer appreciate and put into practice. Sometimes it is easier for us to reword that lackluster sentence or rework that cluttered paragraph ourselves instead of letting the writer do it, especially when we are working on a tight deadline. But we're not helping the writer achieve his full potential if we do the work that he should be doing. Writing is hard work. We need to help the writer embrace that hard reality about the vocation he chose. Writing often takes a lot of rewriting before the writer and the editor arrive at the best version of the manuscript ready for publication. Just want to show an example of, we had a lone male editor in the team. His name is Ian, and I assigned him to work with a new writer, Nelson D., on his book entitled How to Mend a Broken Heart. So the book concept was good, but the manuscript needed a major rewrite. So how did Ian convince Nelson to rewrite? So Ian said, I simply pointed out how his first draft only discussed the heartbreak in one chapter out of 10, and the rest of the manuscript discussed how to choose a good life partner. So I suggested that he reverse the ratio of his content to going into detail on how to deal with heartbreak and how to mend it, and then a short chapter on what to do after the reader has healed. And Ian took the reader's perspective and explained to Nelson first that the reader is brokenhearted and therefore not very open to being preached at. So it might be better to take the approach of a fellow traveler telling his personal stories. The reader is looking for a way to ease the pain before being open to admonitions about doing the right thing. A sympathetic rather than teaching tone would be better received, and the wounded healer can best communicate hope in this distress. And Ian knows this a lot, because at the time that he was working, or at the time that I gave him the assignment, he was also nursing a broken heart. He was also heartbroken at that time. So that's the reason why I assigned the project to him. So this is the book, How to Mend a Broken Heart. And it is so successful that it's written by a male, showing a male perspective, but it was able to cross over to female readership. And their relationship was so good that Ian got Nelson to be his wedding godfather, Nelson and Lucy, his wife. So that's how you seal the relationships. Okay. Now, besides working with the writer on a manuscript, editors can encourage writers to sharpen their writing skills in various ways. First, encourage the writer to read widely. So I took this, I screen grabbed this. This was an MAI webinar last December where they shared about the values of reading. Now, for the writer, it's important for the writer to read widely, because it's impossible for someone to be a writer if he doesn't read, because your voice will be dry. You wouldn't know what rhythm is. So it's important, especially I encourage your writers to read fiction, because when they read fiction, they are exposed to fiction writing devices that they can use even if they are writing nonfiction. And when they read fiction also, they get a sense of what rhythm is in a book. Rhythm is not something you can teach the writer. It is something that he learns when reading a lot of good material. So encourage the writer to read widely. Encourage the writer to have his own notebook where he can write his thoughts and feelings, his questions. So questions that he can ask: what should I look for? When I found it, what should I think about it? When I've thought about it, how should I write about it? So these are just some of the questions. So for those who are still analog and want to write the traditional notebook, and you may also want to use Evernote. The right one is a sample of my Evernote table of contents. So the important thing is to write your thoughts. Maybe spend one afternoon just going out and listening to the hummingbirds or to conversations that you hear, because these are also important in a dialogue, if you need to use dialogue in your works. Also recommend books on writing, helpful links, authors' blogs, podcasts, etc. So these are two of the best books on writing that I like to recommend. Write Better is a new one, but it's very good. I have a Kindle copy of this one. Writer's Library. It's very refreshing for a writer to have access to books when he is so wary, being alone, working alone, and working on his 5th draft already. Just take a break and look for a good book. This is actually my shelf in the office, but writers have access to books that they need. See, so give them access to your library. Lend a book to them, or buy a book for them. Give discounts, because we are book sellers also. So give discounts to writers. Writing workshop. So writing workshop is very encouraging for writers. So you can plan the best time to hold it, whether it's weekly for 2 or 3 months, or once a month for 1 year, 1 week straight, or a writer's month where every Saturday they set aside for a 1-day workshop. So for ideas on what to include, check out Write the Vision, Revised and Enlarged Edition by Marion Van Horn. I think MAI has copies of this book. And Writers Fellowship. Writers Fellowship provides great encouragement to the new writers, especially if they get to know veteran writers who can share with them advice and tips, or who will be willing to coach them or mentor them. No. So the Christian Writers Fellowship is, or OMF Literature is the home of Christian Writers Fellowship for the past 35 years. So we've been meeting regularly, and we just celebrated our 35th year. And this is our Facebook page at the left. And the importance of international conferences like the Lit World. So I'm sharing this photo because the guy beside me is Ronald Molmisa. He's one of our authors, but at this time he's still one of our younger authors. And I convinced our board to bring Ronald to Lit World, for OMF Lit to shoulder the expense so that he can take part in Lit World. So OMF Literature and another funder worked together and financed Ronald's ticket and registration. And you see, in Lit World, you learn not only the skills, but the energy and the inspiration that you get from all the attendees and from those, especially people working in difficult countries in the world. This will really inspire you and really challenge you to be faithful to the work that you're doing. So here in 2012, we brought Ronald to Lit World. And in 2015, he was in Lit World again in Singapore, but already as one of the plenary speakers. So he spoke about reaching the young people. And he really is the best person to speak about this, because Ronald has a series of books on love and relationships for young people. And from this book, a movement called the Love Struck movement has grown. And this movement has been meeting every year, and they are discipling young people and really teaching people to love God and to love others. And also, what is very inspiring about Ronald is he is passing it on. He has a group of young writers that he mentored. So this group, they also came out with a book where Ronald Molmisa is the editor, and they work together. And this is a devotional for Gen Zs. So you see, this is the impact of what we do when we nurture writers, and then these writers get to nurture younger writers. That is very fulfilling for us. Also, of course, seeing the books that we get to work together with the writers, and seeing how these books are being used by the Lord. So in closing, I would just like to encourage everyone through this exhortation from Apostle Paul in 1 Corinthians. He said, "Therefore, my beloved brothers, be steadfast, immovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord." In our case, in the work that we do with the writers in manuscript development, knowing that in the Lord, this work that we do is not in vain. Because really, I believe that in the new heaven and new earth, there will be lots and lots of good books too. So that's it. So if you have questions, do we still have time for a few questions?
Thank you so much, Yna, for that wonderful presentation. I'm glad that you were able to get the last half in before people had to leave. Thank you for everyone who's attended. I know some of you might have to pop off, but we will try and answer the rest of the questions here for those who are able to stay on a little bit past time. So we're really grateful that you were able to come, and we hope that you were as blessed, well, as I was, by this presentation. It's obvious how much experience and wisdom Yna brings to this topic. And I'm so glad that you're willing to share it with all of us. There are a lot
My
of comments
pleasure.
in the chat as well about how relevant this is and how grateful people are for this presentation.
Oh yeah, by the way, if you have questions, you can email me at ynareyes@omflit.com. It's in my last slide, which I forgot to click, but it's ynareyes@omflit.com. Oh, I'll put it in the comment section.
Great idea. So we have a few questions here. Someone asked, how do you let go of a manuscript or even an author? What are the criteria?
Whoa.
I think that's like a declining at some point.
Yes. If the relationship is not moving forward, like if like the author has negative feelings already or has negative attitude, if you cannot work with the author anymore, I think, yeah, but you should really be praying about it first before letting go of, well, we have done that, but it's so hard, I had to get the inputs of our marketing people. I had the manuscript reviewed, because there were certain points in the manuscript that are not acceptable to us as a publisher. And so before discussing it with the author, I had to ask other people, and then the next difficult thing to do is to explain. But you see, if you have a good relationship with the author and he knows that you are trustworthy and that you have a good reason to let it go, then sometimes it has to be let go. And by the way, this manuscript that we let go, he gave to another publisher, secular publisher, and it works with them. So sometimes we are not the publisher for a particular book. So recommend another publisher.
Someone else is asking, how does one get delivered from writers' bad habits of laziness, procrastination, and so forth?
Are you asking as an editor or as a writer?
I wonder, it sounds like it's asking as a
it's
writer.
A writer. Yeah, you just have to stick with your deadlines, no? So not to like in writing, we have to write in chunks, like daily, maybe set 1 or 2 hours to write a part of that book, instead of waiting after several months and then trying to do it in 3 days, which is not workable. So set a time every day. That will be your writing time. And make yourself accountable to a friend if you're really lazy. So make yourself accountable to a friend who can tell you that, hey, stop it. You have to start working. Because, yeah, it's you cannot get over laziness in just a few months. It is a discipline. It is a bad habit that has been developed in a lifetime, and it will take another many years to overcome it. Yeah. But I think a lot of prayer, really pray about it. Because remember, we have the Holy Spirit in us, right? It's the Holy Spirit who equips us and empowers us. It's the Holy Spirit who will give us the power to let go of these bad habits. That's part of sanctification. So let's rely on the Holy Spirit. That's what I always say to our Christian authors, that we should be better writers than those who are not Christian? Because we have the Holy Spirit in us. So imagine the power of the Holy Spirit, the power that uh, resurrected Jesus. That's the same power that we have. Imagine that.
I recently heard that sometimes procrastination is about finding small pleasures, and like, but it takes a long time to get enough fun by distraction. Maybe you should just go out and do something that's actually fun, and then come back with positive energy and sit down and write.
Correct.
Be a little bit more efficient.
Correct.
So that was kind of a fun piece of advice.
Yeah, right. Or maybe also like reward yourself. Like if you decide to do this, then I will reward myself with a pint of ice cream, or reward yourself.
Yeah, that's great.
Oh, by the way, well, maybe you'd like to check out this book, Atomic Habits. I'm listening to it via Audible. So he's talking about little habits and how you develop habits just by 1% and what change it does in the long run. It's a good book.
Habits.
Atomic Habits. He's not a Christian, but the principle is good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Someone else is asking, what would you suggest to a new writer who has no editor or publisher who could finance the publishing of his or her book?
Ooh.
I think this is a question on self-publishing.
Mm-hmm. Look for a friend who is a reader who can comment on your work. If you don't have a professional editor who can work with you, maybe in church, there are many Christians who read a lot. People who read a lot have a sense of what is good in in a work. So just ask them to read and comment.
Yeah, good point. Someone else is asking about the use of local language in, like, at what point do you need to use local terms, and when do you need to translate them?
Okay. It depends on the project, really. It really depends because sometimes the use of local words adds flavor to the manuscript, to the work, So, but too much will alienate readers who are non-speakers of the language. So determine first who are your target readers. If your target readers are just Filipinos, then it's okay to use as many Filipino words there as you want. But if you want to reach non-Tagalog speakers, then you will have to limit the local words, local language. So it really depends on your intention and your target readers. Yeah,
that's a great point.
Oh, I remember there was someone who I think emailed and asked, like he wanted to write a children's story in Hindi, but he's not sure if children will read it. My reply to that is maybe you can try working with your publisher to having it in 2 languages. Like in the Philippines, our children's books are in 2 languages, in Tagalog, Filipino, and in English. So if it can be in Hindi or in the other language that is being used in that country. So you can try that.
Yeah, great idea.
Yeah.
Someone else is asking about how to create a writer's fellowship.
How to create a writer's fellowship. You have you need 2 or 3 people, core group, who will commit to it, make it happen, whatever the difficulties will be. This core group will make it happen. So start with 2 or 3, and then when people see that things are happening and people are getting help. Well, if you offer something that will be helpful to writers, they will go there. Like if you offer maybe a portion in your meeting for critiquing of works, then that will appeal to writers. Or if you invite a speaker or invite speakers who are really respected theologians and good writers, then people will come. So do things that will make people come, make writers come. Yeah.
Yeah, great
You can
idea.
start with small, 2 or 3, and then just let it grow. I remember one of the board members of MAI-Asia, Emily Lim, who is also a children's book author. She's saying that, you know, sometimes we want to do the spectacular, the big things, but really it's the small things that God makes grow. You know, it's because when it's already big, what else can God do? But if it's small, then God has so much space to let it grow.
That's
So
wonderful.
start small and be steadfast.
One last comment from Anton. He's an editor from Indonesia. He's saying how he agrees that an editor represents publisher, reader, and writer, and he really hopes that there's a continuous program from MAI to increase the capacity of editors. From what I understand, I mean,
Shout
this
out
is
to
a
Bernie.
webinar for
Right. Yeah, Bernice Lee, who is the chairperson of MAI-Asia, is here. So Bernice, there's a suggestion. We're working on it, actually. We're already planning for equipping or capacity building activities for editors. Actually, we were planning to have it in Manila in 2020, but the pandemic happened. So, yeah.
That's great. I know at the Lit Africa conference, we had a track for editors, and there was a discussion about how that's something that they want to continue building capacity for. So I think you can stay tuned and sign up for updates with MAI if you want to hear more of either the webinar opportunities, Lit World, or other local events in your region.
Yeah.
And you've seen that Yna's email is in the comments there. It's Yna Reyes at omflit.com. So if you have any other questions for her, or you want to just be in touch and to talk shop with her about similar things you're working on, I'm sure she would be quite open to it.
Yeah. Or follow me on Facebook.
Okay, great. Did you have any final words of wisdom you wanted to leave with the group, Yna?
Just like what Paul said, you know, be steadfast and immovable. Don't quit, you know. If you're called by the Lord to this mission, to this vocation, then he will equip you, he will encourage you, he will bring people to encourage you. Just be faithful, and you will be surprised at how the Lord will reward you for your faithfulness. Because you see, being an editor is like being a doctor, you know. Like if there's an accident, people look for doctors, right? But like if there is a need to put together a good article, so they need editors. The world needs editors, you know. So we are a gifted people, so let's use the gifts that the Lord has given us.
Amen. Thank you to all the editors, writers, publishers who were able to join us today. I'm so glad you could come. And everybody who will be watching this later on YouTube, I hope that you're blessed by the content. Thank you so much to Yna for this amazing presentation that you did. I know we learned a lot, and we have a lot to apply now from all of this wisdom. So we're ready to close out, and everyone have a great rest of your day.
Good night. Good night,
Bye-bye.
good day, good afternoon. Mabuhay.